When you think about international borders, you probably picture something pretty clear-cut, right? A river, a mountain range, or just a big line with a sign. But sometimes a line drawn on a map creates situations that are just so strange, they almost defy logic. We're about to dive into the bizarre world of US towns that are, believe it or not, geographically trapped inside Canada.
Seriously, just imagine this for a second. What if, to get to the next town over for groceries, to go to high school, or to see a doctor, you had to cross an international border not once, but twice? Well, for some Americans, this isn't some weird hypothetical. It's their daily reality.
So, how in the world did this even happen? Well, it all boils down to this line right here, the 49th parallel. Back in the 19th century, after the Treaty of 1818, surveyors basically drew this long, straight line across the continent to separate the US and Canada. It was supposed to be a simple, clean, and final solution, all based on the maps they had at the time. But what looks simple on a map gets incredibly complicated on the ground. This perfectly straight line didn't really account for things like coastlines, or huge lakes, or, the actual people who would end up living there. It's a classic case of a simple solution creating some truly complex problems. So let's see what that looks like in real life. Okay, our first stop takes us to the northernmost point of the contiguous United States, a tiny community called Angle Inlet, Minnesota. It's part of a piece of land known as the Northwest Angle. And here's the kicker: it's completely cut off from the rest of the US by the Lake of the Woods. And the sheer scale here, or really the lack of it, is what's so fascinating. We're talking about a year-round population of just 54 people. It's this tiny, isolated community where everyone knows everyone, all of them bound together by this unique geographical predicament. And to really get a handle on their daily life, just consider this. If a resident of Angle Inlet wants to do a big shopping trip at Costco, the closest option isn't in Minnesota or anywhere else in the States. Nope. It's in Winnipeg, Canada. That one fact says just about everything about their practical connection to the world. All right, now let's head west over to Washington State, to a place called Point Roberts. It's bigger than Angle Inlet, and as we're about to see, more people can mean even bigger challenges. And here, you can see the difference, clear as day. With a population of nearly 1,200 people, the problems of isolation aren't just inconvenient anymore. They become systemic. You can't just make do when you've got over 1,000 residents to consider. So the crucial thing here is what's missing. Point Roberts has no hospital. Its kids have to cross the border into Canada, then back into the US just to get to high school. Any trip to the American mainland involves two separate border checkpoints. It's a logistical nightmare just woven right into the fabric of everyday life. This situation is so persistent that this idea has been floated, and pretty seriously. I mean, think about that. The residents' connection to their own country is so strained that some people actually see becoming part of Canada as the most logical solution. It's a pretty profound statement about identity and practicality. For our final stop, we're shifting from the politically complex to the visually absurd. We're heading to the border between Vermont and Quebec, to a place where the 49th parallel gets really personal. This is the town of Stansted, Quebec, and it just sort of seamlessly blends into Darby Line, Vermont. It's a community that was here long before the border was ever finalized. And here, the border isn't a checkpoint or a fence. It's a line running right down the middle of Canusa Avenue. On one side, you're in Canada. On the other, you're in the United States. And crossing that line is no casual stroll. That's right. If you just step from one side of the road to the other without going through an official port of entry, you can be arrested right there on the spot for an illegal border crossing. It's probably the most literal interpretation of an international boundary you will ever see. So, after visiting these unique places, what does it all really mean? These aren't just geographical novelties. They are communities of real people whose lives are shaped and often complicated by a line drawn on a map over a century ago. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. In a world of shared economies and digital connections, what's the role of a physical border? For the people of Angle Inlet, Point Roberts, and Stansted, that line on the map is everything. It dictates where they shop, where they go to school, and even which side of the street they can walk on. It forces us to ask, when does a line on a map stop being a border and start being a barrier?